Tahana kia koutou. Nau mai, haere mai, piki mai, kaki mai. Thank you for joining us all here today for our first newly renamed Strategy and Recovery Committee meeting. Before we begin, I'd like to open with a karakia, which I will just get. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa pounamu te moana. Hei hurahi mā tātou I te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou I e tātou katoa. Hui e, tae ki e. We have apologies today from Councillor Kerr, who is currently away on council business, Councillor Redstone, Councillor Harvey, Izzy Crawshaw, and also apologies for lateness from Ms. Sandra. Do we have any other apologies?
I'd like an apology for leaving early. I have a speaking appointment to go to.
Do we have any? Oh, yes, no. Thank you. What time are you? 2:30, thank you. Any leaves of absence? No? Okay, thank you. I'd like to let everyone know that we are currently live streaming this meeting, and I welcome anyone who is tuning in from home or their workplace at the moment. And just like to remind everyone that our councillors use their iPads to read their reports and papers, so if you see them on their iPads, it is for meeting business. And I please ask all councillors to ensure that their iPads don't block the microphones when they're speaking, just so that our community who are tuning in at home can hear you clearly. I'd like to remind everyone as well of conflicts of interest as we progress through the agenda. If there are any conflicts, please raise them at the time and we will address them accordingly. Moving on now to item 3, which is confirmation of minutes. One correction from the agenda, the minutes of the previous Strategy and Policy Committee meeting was on the 18th of May, not the 8th, and was previously circulated. Can I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Thank you, Councillor Watkins. All those in favour? Any against? Thank you, that's carried. I'll now move on to item 4, which is the Marae Kākaho Community Plan 2023 to 2028, and welcome Kirsten Thompson and Mari Fitzsimons to join us.
There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be here with you today. I would like to, on behalf of Focus Marae Kākaho, bring you the next iteration of the Marae Kākaho Community Plan. I have with me Mari Fitzsimons, who's the chair of Focus Marae Kākaho, and she'll have a few words to you in a minute. You have all received the draft community plan and the report, and I'd like to take that as read, but would like to have a couple of minutes to share or bring your attention to a few things, Madam Chair, if that's okay. Just a bit of history. This is the second iteration of the Marae Kākaho plan. The first one was endorsed by Council in March 2018, and that was for 2017 to 2022. In July of 21, Council agreed to support Focus Marae Kākaho to create a new plan, and in September 23, so just a month or so ago, that was presented at an informal meeting of the Community Wellbeing Subcommittee with the support of the Rural Community Board, and we are here today in the final step of having this plan endorsed so the community can move forward with it. The actions in the plan flow nicely from the first iteration, and they've built on the outcomes that the community have already achieved, and yes, are a continuation of those areas which are still interest area for the community to celebrate and to, they believe, work on and improve in. So I'm going to hand over to Mari and she'll give you a wee bit more from her perspective. That one. No.
Tēnā koutou katoa. It's my privilege to present the Focus Marae Kākohau Community Plan to you and the Hastings District Council for your approval. It is, as Kirsten has said, the culmination of widespread community consultation and then a bringing together of those ideas by our committee. It is also building on the great work that our Focus Marae Kākohau achieved over the last 5 years, and in particular I want to thank Jonathan Stockley as the past chairman of that committee for the leadership that he showed, and also the continuing mentoring that he has provided to our committee and to me is very much appreciated. I also want to thank the Hastings District Council for your continuing support in many ways with your personnel and with financial support and all kinds of social support as well. And we are very much hoping that that will continue because it is very much appreciated. Particularly, I want to thank Debbie North and Jodie Hamilton for the work they did, but very particularly to Kirsten Thompson for her leadership and guidance over the last 3 or 4 months to bring this eventually to you today. And it's going to be really good to see it published and being able to be spread around our community. I also want to thank my fellow committee members. Unfortunately, they send their apologies. They're not able to be here today. They're all full-time workers, but they've left it to me, the retired granny, to present you with our community plan, which I hope that you will approve. I think that our community plan is encapsulated in our vision, which I will read to you. The vision is for a strong rural community centred around a social, environmental and economic hub which links the past with the future. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Are there any other comments that you'd like to make around the plan? No, thank you. And thank you so much for that presentation and filling in the journey that you've been through. I'd now like to open it for questions or comments. Councillor Dixon.
Jonathan, want to go first? I'm fine. Mara, you should know there's no such thing as a retired granny. But nice to see you here. But just one simple question from me. I was looking at the map and your planning, and it's a very comprehensive, a very impressive plan, so well done. I'm just wondering where Kirraroo fits in, because you've got the Mangatahi Road, it looks like, and everyone that lives in Kirraroo has to travel through Marae Kākohau, so where do they fit in?
Well, they do have to travel through Marae Kākohau, but currently they can't. They have to go around.
I know, Salisbury Road, I know that, sorry. Yeah.
Because the road's shut. But we have close ties with Kirraroo. They tend to be more centred around their school and their hall, but nevertheless we still have strong ties between us. And there are members of our group who are very strongly connected with Kirraroo as well. So we work together.
Yeah, thank you. Why I asked that question, I once taught at Mangatahi School. I knew the connections between both communities. I was just wondering where it was at. Thank you.
Jonathan Stockley.
Thank you, Chair. A comment or two, really, from my perspective. As Myra's just mentioned, I've had the privilege of being closely involved with the Focus Marae Kākohau team for many years now, and the previous iteration of this plan and the early stages of the development of this one. And I really wanted to just reiterate with councillors and with this committee the huge value to any community, but particularly our Marae Kākohau community, our rural community, the huge value in being able to prepare a plan like this, to be able to work with council, to be engaged so well by council staff and supported so well by council staff in this process. It's not just the end result, it's actually the process of going through consultation with the community, guidance from council staff on the way to think these things through, to identify the priorities and to achieve all those good things which we all hope to achieve. It's a fantastic process, and I would say thank you to everybody involved. And just to anybody from any community that doesn't have a plan, that might be thinking about it, it's so worthwhile. Don't hesitate. Engage with the council on this. Work with your community to develop a plan like this. And the empowerment that is given to communities by council and by this process is just so valuable. So thank you to everybody, and that's pretty much my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Councillor Baddo.
Just like to acknowledge what Jonathan has just said and how lovely it's been to be involved with Marae Kako and see a community that knows where it wants to go and now has a plan of how to get there. And I'm really looking forward to see what you and your committee can achieve over the next 5 years.
Thank you. If there's no other questions or comments, do we have a mover or a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Baddo. Thank you, Councillor Dixon. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you. That's carried. Thank you very much for joining us today, and congratulations. For completeness, I made an error earlier and didn't put the apologies for mover and a seconder. So can I please have a mover for the apologies read out earlier? Thank you, Councillor Hickey. Thank you, Councillor Lawson, for seconding. All those in favour? Any against? Thank you, that's carried. And again, I will just clarify, are there any leaves of absence? No. Okay, thank you. We'll move on now to item 5, library fines cessation of current policy. I'd like to welcome Carla Crosby and Shelley Hudson to join us.
Happy to move, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Sandra. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Given we have a mover and a seconder, I will simply ask whether or not there are any questions. Thank you, Councillor Nixon.
Thank you. Yeah, I made a mistake at the beginning. I remembered the 163,000 have accumulated. I thought, wow, that much a year. But I've got that wrong. I did. I was wondering, with the forgiveness of fines, because it's a significant amount of money that helps us along, has any thought or is there any provision for people simply to make a donation, type of thing as they walk in the door in lieu of fines? Because people might be willing just to drop a few coins in. I'm sure a lot of people would be.
Through you, Madam Chair, the amount of fines on individual memberships is quite small.
Oh yeah, no, I accept that.
And we do accept donations readily from the community.
But is there a process to make it easy? I mean, if you've got to go through a process, if you just throw $2 in the tin, that's easy. If you have to go through a whole palaver, it's difficult.
I think it's an excellent idea for us to pursue, Councillor Nixon, and that's something I think we can take up through the Community Wellbeing Committee. I will look to Anna Apatu to pick that up on our behalf.
Other than that, I'll move it.
We have a mover and a seconder, but thank you.
Oh, clearly
you have enthusiasm. Thank you. Councillor Apatu.
Just to acknowledge the critical roles our libraries play within our community and our district, and acknowledging that, yes, I can see how fines could be a barrier and we just don't need to have any form of barrier. So I'm just supportive, very supportive.
Thank you, Councillor Apatu. Are there any other comments or questions? No, thank you. We have a mover who has left the room, but we are okay to proceed. So we have a mover and a seconder. If I can please put that motion. All those in favour? Aye. Any against? Thank you, that's carried. Well done, team. What great news for the community. Thank you for bringing it through to us. Okay, we will now move on to item 6, which is the Hastings District Cyclone Recovery Framework Update. I'll invite Jessica to make her way up here with Gus, and while they do, Mr. Cameron, do you have some comments?
Through Madam Chair, does Councillor Nixon wish to? Sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the Chair, you'll see the next series of reports coming up to Council relate to our recovery operations. I'd just like to acknowledge both the team that are here today, Gus and Jessica, and it's on leave today, and the wider Council team working in our property buyout offices and across Council. It's been a substantial journey for Council over the last 8 months to get us here. Substantial efforts from both the governance level and all the groups and teams within Council. And I think you'll see in the depth of the information in the reports that reflects both the depth in terms of volume and the depth in terms of complexity of work going on. And at the same time, trying to support all our communities of interest through this, and also acknowledging that the council staff involved in this process are also part of those communities of interest and managing their own circumstances that they need to manage as a consequence of the outcome of the cyclone event. So just really want to publicly acknowledge the efforts of our staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. I think we all share your sentiment, especially observing the mahi that's gone on in particular since obviously the cyclone. I'd like to hand over now to Jessica Peterson, who's going to take us through this report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am here to present on the recovery framework to you all. Thank you for having me here today. I just want to point out that you have the Regional Recovery Authority plan in your documents as well, which we have added in for your information. And Gus will be reporting on the actual recovery update. My specific piece of work is the framework itself. As you all know, recovery has been quite a rise in the last few months. We have had to work very quickly as an organisation to identify the needs in the community and develop and implement support for the community. This piece of work is about, I guess, gripping that up and creating a reporting framework so we can actually begin to identify properly and measure and monitor the work that we are doing. This report, we feel, fills a gap that we have. Excuse me. There we go. Fills a gap that we feel that we have in the system, in the recovery system. We produced the locality plan in April, you may remember. That report was identifying all of the recovery actions that needed to happen in the Heretatonga Hastings District. This piece of work is about identifying the Hastings District Council's specific actions, our specific role in recovery, and the key activities we're going to undertake in fulfilling that role. It will enable the performance management of those key activities, and what we are hoping, or what we are planning for, is that the recovery framework will be able to dovetail quite nicely into the long-term plan as it becomes up for renewal next year. I think best practice in recovery for councils is to ensure that as soon as possible it is able to move into a BAU reporting process, and hence looking to the long-term plan as our key document as a council. Oh, sorry. So in developing this framework, what we have done is look to the Regional Recovery Agency, its vision, outcomes and objectives that is identified. We've tried to define the Hastings District Council role, objectives and activities. We have used the locality plan in doing that. We, of course, have done an enormous amount of community engagement over the last 8 months and really listened to the community and what they are saying, and looked to that information to help identify the activities. And from that, we have looked to activities and performance measures with, as I said earlier, the long-term plan. Thank you. Upper Pavio is a structural diagram of how we have conceived recovery within the council. You will see on the right-hand side we have 6 PO that you probably are familiar with: community and whānau resilience, infrastructure resilience, environmental resilience, primary sector and economic growth. They mirror the PO that have been identified in the Regional Recovery Plan. For Hastings District Council, because it is such a significant piece of work, we have added in another PO as the Category 3 buyout. It is a huge piece of work for the council, which we will be reporting to in a minute. You will also notice the absence of a PO that has been there, which is the transition PO. The activities under that PO are now completed, and so we have folded that PO and replaced it with a Category 3. We have also identified within the council that to support this work being done, there is an enormous amount of support in the recovery space. So we have identified the support PO, comms, reporting, both to you and to our external funders, and coordination, which is the piece of work that the recovery team does. We have also identified, because it is so critically important, our partnership with Mana Whenua and how that connects into the recovery program. And the wider work that council does as a part of its BAU and the support that plays in recovery. And in the report you will see we have tried to draw out some of those things that council does as its BAU that is, while not a recovery activity per se, really supports recovery. And then at the top, of course, acknowledging that this piece of work is really truly an across-council piece of work and requires coordination and thought to ensure that it is not conflicting with each other. Thank you. I just want to dive into the PO in a little more detail for you at this point. Community and whānau resilience and infrastructure resilience are definitely the weight of work from a council perspective. Obviously, from an infrastructure point of view, there is a lot of infrastructure in the district that the council owns and manages. It is a significant piece of work, and they have been working really hard to reinstate that infrastructure as quickly as possible. It is identified as a 5 to 10 year program. Community and whānau resilience, you are all well embedded in your communities. I am sure you are well aware of what has happened and the impact that it has had on people. The council has developed a work program to support community through the next 3 years. As you see, things such as community hubs, community recovery planning, the navigational support through the connections, which is a critically important piece of work that will go on for a long period of time. The next two, the Category 3 buyout, I won't speak to this too much because we're reporting on it next, but also a significant piece of work for the council. Environmental resilience often is thought of as a regional council specific piece of work, but actually in diving down and talking to people within the council around their recovery activities, we really did identify that there was a piece, not all of it, but a piece that was a Hastings District Council responsibility. Things such as spatial planning, the FOSL work, so the categorisation work, and understanding the implications of that in parks and reserves. The final two PO represent a different perspective for the council. While we don't have activities that are specific to these in recovery, we closely work with our partners in both the primary sector and economic growth. There is a lot of, particularly in these areas, council has identified in its long-term plan and its work programs quite a lot of work it does to support and encourage work in these areas, and we really wanted to acknowledge that in the plan. And then there is the work and other recovery PO that support these two PO, such as the infrastructure work, particularly the connectivity in the rural sector, so critical to both economic growth and the primary sector recovering. And so we have identified and drawn out those relationships. So while there aren't specific actions there for council, we believe those actions are still there, if that makes sense. Thanks, guys. So the next part of the plan, beyond the structure, is about identifying, as I said, the key activities. We have performance measures for each of those activities, timeframes and costs. This is an ongoing and evolving part of the plan. It will change, I believe, week to week, month to month, as we identify new needs in the community, and we are responsive to those needs. And I think the Category 3 buyout program is an example of that. In February and March, that was not a part of our work program. Suddenly it's a very large part of our work program, and I think part of the art of recovery is staying responsive and agile enough to be able to meet the needs of the community as and where they're at as they move through recovery. So please watch this space. The plan will continue to be updated and monitored and reported on to this. So we will be coming back to you as a committee to keep doing that. Thank you very much. If it pleases the chair, I'm happy to take questions.
Councillors, do we have any questions? Councillor Buddo.
Thanks for showing us that, and I think it's really great to have an understanding of what our lanes are and what this council's role is in fulfilling the recovery. And thank you for pointing out for the rural sector, you're right, the infrastructure resilience and getting the roading network back up and running is by far the best thing we can do for the community, for economic growth, and for the primary sector as a whole. So it's lovely to see the focus on that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, Sandra.
Kia ora. Thank you, team. Through you, Chair. I'm really interested in the reporting. The framework is very sound, but I think the reporting and monitoring is critical for us as governors and for us to fully understand where we're tracking with roads and infrastructure and resilient infrastructure. And so I think that, how we're going to do that is really important for us around the table, how the government funding is being traced and tracked, audited, and so that's the part that I'm really interested in, how we're going to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Obviously this is the Strategy and Recovery Committee, and so we're presenting the strategy to you. The intention is that through the performance and monitoring community, we will be reporting on those individual actions and our progress against those performance measures, and with the corresponding financials against those performance measures as well. So we're currently pulling that report together for the next performance and monitoring meeting, and the intention is that we will be reporting quarterly to you as our governance on the recovery work program. As you have pointed out, we do have responsibilities for reporting to external agencies, particularly through funding agreements, and they have their own requirements regarding reporting identified. So we're working particularly with finance to identify those and then identify the requirements around the financial reporting and when they go out. So we've got a cadence of reporting identified. If I may, please correct me if you think differently, Gus, but through the recovery team under Gus, we will be ensuring that we are meeting our requirements on that external and internal reporting, and so the reporting piece will sit with Gus.
Thank you. I am just worried about making sure our community understands what we were at and what we're doing with our recovery, and for us quarterly isn't probably going to be enough to be able to share with our community when their road is going to be actioned, when their culvert's going to be actioned. And so I think that, it's having that really sort of clear direction about also the communications plan with our wider community, through our community leaders, etc. I think we probably need to put our mind to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the actions or activities that is identified in the framework is identifying a comms and engagement plan for the community around how we are keeping them up to date. So perhaps it's just that we haven't got the detail of that to present to you yet, but certainly we've identified that as one of our key reporting communities, I guess. Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Through you, Madam Chair, I might ask Naomi just to comment on the plan, on the thinking that we're doing behind the scenes, or Marcoms is doing on those community engagements.
So if I can speak. So we have through you, Chair, we have been meeting to discuss how we progress forward, because it has shifted cadence now that we've got through to the buyout and we've now got our funding for the roading program. The conversation we've been having is that the roading program is the basis that we need to form our communications on, and therefore it'll also be quite bespoke depending on each community's program of works. There is an initial burst we need to focus on of giving everyone a here's where we're at today at a global level. So there's focus on, if you've got a bridge that's out, where is it in the plan? Is it number 1? Is it number 8? Is it number 20? We'll talk to you in 2028. So it's around, first of all, setting the information scene at a global level, and we're looking at website tools for doing that. We're working really closely with Craig Thu's team. We're looking at then at developing what is the reporting through to those communities, working between the Community Connector team, the comms team, the roading team, and then any other specific interactions that we're having. For example, Havelock North obviously has more focus still on the 2C properties, so that's, whilst it's not linked to roading, they're part of that program of comms. So for some communities, there'll be an initial flurry, and it will be about setting the scene about what they can expect to hear from us, and then making sure we have updates at the frequency that is correct for that community. And so for some of them, it will be quite regular as we move into key phases. For others, it will just be that they can go onto the website and see that that their project's moved from design into tender. So we want to keep that back, the stuff they don't see, really visible, and also for them to see that if we're not on their road, we are on a road. You know, we want to show the immense amount of work that the team are undertaking across the entire district, and that needs to align as well as we head into the LTP conversations, that they need to be able to see that investment that we're making is actually literally hitting the road. So we will be working through, so it might be quite bespoke, but we acknowledge that the wider community as the ratepayer will want to be kept abreast of this, and originally there'll be a sort of initial focus on giving everyone up to speed on what we're doing, and then working through with communities.
Thank you, Naomi. Nayo.
Kia ora. Kia ora, Chair. Just the partai, so thank you for that very comprehensive report. And notwithstanding dealing with the Matariki governance and our leaders, but there's a lot of operations in that. And Ngāti Kahungunu, in my role in the Taiao space, at their operational level, we've been pretty proactive in promoting, rethinking our relationship with our waterways and our environment. And I see there's working with the Taiao, not against. But there's a lot said in this paper, and it can mean all kinds of things to different people. And want to be involved in that process on how that looks. And I see a lot of building back, but questionable whether it's better or not, and having that, like it says, a genuine partnership with Tangata Whenua, not just at our leader space, but if we've been having these conversations and been told quite a bit, oh, we're in recovery, that's down the track or out of the scope, but I see recovery talks about a medium term and long term here of reconstruction and improvement. So generally want to have that ongoing conversation with those who have been in the space about what that improvement might be like, and just moving on from potentially just some nice words of working with the Taiao constantly, but I'm not sure I've seen how that would manifest properly in some of our outcomes going forward. I know there's a big focus on getting bridges up and getting business back to usual, but I'm particularly interested in how we avoid what occurred if it were to happen again. So, kia ora.
Mr. Cameron.
Thank you for your comments there, Nayo. Wholeheartedly heed what you've just had to say. It's probably fair to say that this is a learning space for council. It's new territory for obviously staff and governance, and I think the key sort of underpinning premise and value for council is we need to be a learning and growing organisation, cognizant of your commentary just there, and learn and debrief all the time as to how we can engage and continue to do better. And prime example of that is the property office team get together and debrief as a team after every engagement meeting, and pick up the learnings out of that meeting. And there's been thorough preparation and planning and getting ready for things, but I understand, and Gus will go into it on the property office paper, but it's quite staggering out of each meeting. There's good learnings as to how we can essentially do better. What I am really proud of is there is that genuine will on the part of council and staff and our governance table here that we are quite genuine in wanting to operate off that sound set of values and principles. And from that base, just want to continue to do better and answer the comments that you've just made there.
Thank you. Moving on to Councillor Nixon.
Thanks, Chair. Hopefully I didn't miss this in the presentation. It's possible because I was trying to write notes at the same while you were talking. In parallel with our own cyclone recovery program, all the other agencies, Waka Kotahi, you name them all, they're just all in there working. How do we make sure that there is consistency between their activities and ours? And also, how do we make sure we know what our ratepayers and residents are telling these organisations that maybe they don't tell us, so we don't actually have the full picture?
Through you, Madam Chair. No, it's a very good question, and the Regional Recovery Agency has a critical role in this space for the region in helping to do that coordination and alignment. We all have a coordination and alignment role across our organisations and our activities, but the RRA plays a key role. I know, Craig, not to put you on the spot, but if I could throw to you, I know that you've had active engagements with Waka Kotahi and the other infrastructure providers on how we align that activity. Would you like to talk to that?
Why not? Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a really good point, Councillor, and it's an active conversation at the moment. I would not suggest that we have got an elegant solution that will guarantee that everyone is not going to trip over everyone else. But it is fair to say all parties, particularly in our respect, in terms of, if I take a transport view, the need for our transport team and the demand on resources and talking to community, the Transport Recovery East Coast Alliance, TREC, we as two parties alone must be quite tight because we have the ability to trip each other up really quickly if we're not careful. But it's also important that we're working with our partners at Central Hawke's Bay, Napier a little bit less so because they don't have quite the same recovery journey. And then further north to Wairoa, just to make sure that we're actually coming up with programs that are complementary and not cooking the system. But one of the challenges, and it was just discussed at a meeting on Monday, is how we're managing what will be finite resources and the ability to get all the products that we need to actually repair and put things together. In terms of awareness of what the community is saying to each entity, I think that will go to trust, building really strong relationships across those entities, so there's a trusted relationship to share openly information we each have, or each of us gather from our collective community.
I'll just supplement with another question. How do you make sure we know what's going on around this table, but in that same area?
That is a critical role of the framework, and in fact, so we're clear about where we're playing a role, we're clear about where others are playing a role, we're clear about where the overlaps are, and we're monitoring that effectively on an ongoing basis so that we have the business information is wrapped up and we can bring it through to this committee and performance and monitoring. So that's exactly why we're doing it, because we know we need to.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Moving on to Councillor Hickey.
Kia ora, and just through the chair, my question is we're using the use of the term PO in a lot of the reference, but to the unsuspecting ratepayer, they may not understand what you actually mean, because we also use PO ahurea in the same document, which refers to someone's job title. So I'm wondering if they're, and I'm going to make an assumption that you're referring to work streams. So maybe, I think maybe something should be put in, possibly executive summary, that the use of PO in reference to the work streams will be used throughout, so that it doesn't kind of leave people wondering, what are they talking about?
Thank you, Councillor Hickey. Excellent idea.
Yeah, thank you. We'll definitely do that.
Yeah,
thank
kia
you.
ora.
Kia ora. Okay, a couple of last minute amendments to the report that's in front of you. So you'll note in 3.4, it makes reference to June 2023. This is to be corrected to October, just so everyone's aware. These are minor changes, but worth noting. Also 3.6, there is a note, I will read out the new paragraph for this. It was approved by the Matariki Governance Group in October 2023 and submitted to the Crown as it sets out the pathway for how Hawke's Bay will recover, with overarching outcomes for recovery over the short term, medium and long terms. So very minor amendments, but worth noting. We have some recommendations that are sitting on page 18. Can I please have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hickey. Thank you, Councillor Watkins. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you, that's carried. And thank you, team, for the huge amount of mahi that's gone into this framework development. We look forward to the reporting in the future. So while you're comfortable, we will move on to item 7, which is, Yep, item 7, the Hastings District Council Cyclone Gabrielle Recovery Update. So just a reminder that we've just endorsed the new framework, and this update is not done within the new framework, but to the best of the ability to keep us updated, and future updates will be in the new framework. So I'll hand over to the team now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're just waiting for the presentation to pop up. Thanks, team. Great, click up. Yeah. So through you, Madam Chair, thank you. This gives me a pleasure to bring this paper to your attention. This is a brief update on the recovery activity since our last update in April, on April the 18th this year. As Craig noted earlier, there have been ongoing significant and increased workloads across the organisation, and so just huge mahi on a daily basis, whether it's directly related to the recovery or through all of the support that the council provides those key activities. We've also noted earlier that the recovery program is forecast to continue for at least the next 5 years and beyond. And so for infrastructure, it's obviously a longer time period than that, 5 to 10 years. This is essentially an interim report as we work to develop the recovery framework. So now that we have the recovery framework in draft, what we'll do the next time around is actually translate that into an ongoing update, and that will become the recovery update. So this is essentially just an interim report until we move into a new cycle next time. Thanks. So I thought I'd just mention key activities since April. We have been working very closely on a daily basis with Hawke's Bay Regional Council and Napier City Council with our affected communities on the land categorisation process. That has been very detailed and quite complex at time at work. It has involved a large number of people from across the organisations, not least the communities team, but also a big shout out to Mikey and the GIS team, who is an absolute star, who is without his support we would never have been able to do the work as detailed and with accuracy as we have been able to. But Marcoms have also been a very, very significant contributor to this work. So that is ongoing. We have, I'll talk about the voluntary buyout policy and office separately, but now that the Category 3 property owners have been essentially, they are now being dealt with through the voluntary buyout office, we still have a daily and weekly engagements with our remaining Category 2 property owners. So that's been a significant and continues to be a significant piece of work. We've obviously developed and adopted the voluntary buyout policy, which came to you and was adopted on the 14th of September. Since that point, we have been very busy establishing the voluntary buyout office, and we'll talk to you about that separately. And we've been doing work behind the scenes on the recovery framework, which Jessica's just talked to you about. As Jessica did, there are really two really critical areas in the recovery where we're doing a lot of heavy lifting as a council, the community and whānau wellbeing area that is led by the community and wellbeing services team. I'm still getting my head around that term. And a couple of milestones there just to flag. So They've helped through the SAGE consultancy work, developed 11 recovery action plans, and they've secured $1.27 million of funding from Ministry of Primary Industries to develop 10 community resilience hubs across the district. So that's a very significant achievement, and those resilience hubs will play a really critical role for those communities, you know, if we find ourselves in a situation when they are needed again. And on infrastructure resilience, which is another critical area of our recovery activity, there's $800 million program of work to rebuild the district's transportation network. As I've said, it will take 5 to 10 years to achieve, and we're making some really good, Craig and team are making some really good progress. So we're re-establishing a connection to isolated communities, well, we have done that, and reinstatement and clearance of 392 of 590 low-level slips. The remainder expected to be completed by the end of November, so really significant activity there. That's it, just a brief highlights of the paper. Over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, team. And as councillors will note, this report is very much for our information, but do I have any questions or comments on the information we've been provided to date? Noting there is a significant summary of key recovery work on pages 31 to 39. Thank you for outlining that for us. Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Gus, the community resilient hubs, how were the locations of these decided? What criteria was used?
I'll invite Ms Dinwoody to come up and answer that question, since this is her given area of expertise.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. There are a number of criteria used, Councillor Dixon, to determine the 10. There were some of the criteria were set by the funders, MPI, so they were that they had to be rural and that they had to be cyclone affected. And then we looked at other things which included the likelihood that they'd be isolated again, so the fragility of their roading, whether or not they were on a main highway, so are likely to get travellers through to help in those situations. The number of community that a particular area was servicing. So it was a lot of criteria that we used to make the decisions.
Thank you. The one that I'm most interested in, they had to be rural.
That's correct.
Thank you. Councillor Bardo.
I just wanted to thank the team for the table on page 33, which details the roading works and kind of expected completion times. Those are the questions I face most from the community in terms of what are realistic timeframes, when's my road going to be open, and those kind of things. So it's great to have a table, and amazing to see the scale and scope of the works that do need to be completed.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Oh, Mr. Thurg.
Through you, Madam Chair, just sort of picking up on that comment from Councillor Bodo, just want to remind councillors at this stage that's the indicative timing is best of our knowledge, and one of the discussions that we've been having with Naomi's team and some of the reticence of the team of sharing dates is it's uncertain, and the landing we've come to is we will share the dates as best as knowledge, and as we update them, we'll just update the community of changes rather than holding back until we're more firmed up. Some of that timing will play out of conversations with Crown Investment Partners, which are happening this week as well. So we'll keep updating those as they change. So, and similarly, some projects, if we run into delays in negotiating land, then we'll swap projects around and so forth. So those dates aren't locked and loaded forever, but they are our best estimate for the community.
Thank you for that reminder. Do I have any other questions or comments? No? Okay. We have a recommendation that is on page 28. Can I please have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Bardo. Thank you, Councillor Watkins. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Any against? Thank you, that's carried. Thank you, team. We'll now move on to the next item on our agenda, which is item 8, the establishment of the Category 3 Voluntary Buyout Office. And again, I will hand over to you, Gus, to take us through your hard mahi in this area.
Thank you, Madam Chair. David Elliott, who is our new operations manager at the Voluntary Buyout Office, is going to join us. And Just wanted to acknowledge my appreciation of the huge work that David and team have been doing over the last, 8 weeks now, 9 weeks. I think it's 9 weeks since we really got stuck into the establishment mahi. And so I'm going to ask David to take you through some highlights of that establishment and look forward to questions. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Gus, and thank you everybody for the opportunity to speak. The buyout office is in full swing. We have property owners in meetings as we speak, in both of the meeting rooms over in the VBO, as we call it. For your own update, we've now had, we've got 60 property owners booked in for meetings, and we've reached 73% of all eligible people. We hope to have that 95% by the end of tomorrow. So that I'd like to acknowledge that is the work of our 4 community connectors who have been working exceedingly hard, and their workload only increases with the meetings because they have to attend every meeting, and those meetings at the moment are running around 2 hours per meeting. There's a lot of people have a lot of things, obviously, they want to discuss. It's their first opportunity. So the establishment of the voluntary buyout office. It's good? Yeah, we're good. Okay. We, again, focus on those 3 things: the people, the place, and the processes. The people side of the house, there we go. There we go. There's a mixture of seconded and new council officers. We have council support staff that we draw on, particularly around finance with the Crown funding agreement and the reports that are required there. Communications, obviously, for the stories that have started to impact on the news cycle. GIS and Mikey and his team have already been mentioned. Contracted services for the valuation and acquisition with the property group. And we've also drawn on the property group for helping establish our GIS platform, which is basically up and running. We're just making a few final tweaks to it, but that will be good. As a dashboard, you'll be able to see exactly where we're at any time with the number of properties and the stage that they're at through the process. And subcontracted services, we have obviously John getting more valuers. The geotech and surveyors are becoming more important, particularly when we talk about split category properties, those that are 3/2C, 3/1. And geotech will become more of an issue once we head towards the acquisition and demolition side of the house, and we need to look at what council is actually purchasing in the state of the land that we're picking up. We're responsible, obviously, to 3 separate groups. You represent yourselves and the ratepayers, providing 50% of the funding, the Crown, the other 50%, and of course, and foremost, the affected property owners that we're working with. We had a team building exercise, as you know, before we started this process. Once we were about a week out from setting up or opening up, and these are the 6 things that we came up with to help us through this very challenging process in time. First of all, we focused on what we're trying to do, and we always come back that we are creating hope that is helping other possibilities emerge for our homeowners. So giving them pathways that they can hopefully elect to take or not to take, but at least giving them opportunities. Really important for us that we communicate, collaborate, and celebrate. That's communicating with each other and collaborating with each other mainly, because everything we're doing is brand new. Every time something happens, we have to go back and revisit a process. Just yesterday, we had to revisit processes for how we were collecting information and then sending it on to the valuers, and that was a process that we tweaked and went back through. And we celebrate meetings when they come through, and we have good meetings. We celebrate when we have bad meetings, because at least we're achieving what we want, and we celebrate our mistakes if they're non-intentional, because we're going to make them, because it's all brand new to everybody. Walk in their shoes while delivering for all reminds us that we need to look at these things through different lenses as those 3 groups we mentioned before. So primarily the homeowners and what they've been through over the last 9 months, and always being cognizant that emotions run high. We walk in the shoes of our ratepayers when we look at special circumstances and the cost implications and the policy implications and what our ratepayers are hoping for us to achieve, and also with the Crown and the requirements for reporting to them. Confidence built on integrity is really important. We have become aware as people come in that there's a lot of discussion in the community about this, that, and the other thing. There's a lot of, over the last 9 months, built up, not frustration, but people sharing stories and so forth and what to expect and experience that they've had with councils in general. And so for us, it's really important that everything we do is opaque and transparent. done honestly and without bias, so we can stand on our integrity no matter what comes out in the future. Enjoy the roller coaster. Yep, as I mentioned previously, that's our Delilah moment, why? And we had that just the other day when someone had a particularly difficult meeting. Why are we here? We're here to try and help people, and so no matter what happens, we will enjoy it. And delivering a smooth process, trying to get people through as quickly and efficiently and as smooth as we can, so we don't add to any strain that they might already be suffering. Place, Hastings Street is, well, it's Hastings Street, but not as you know it. It's brand new with the 2 meeting rooms set up now. Again, thanks to the councillors for letting us borrow your furniture. And the Salvation Army received a $30 donation from me for a new coffee table. So we are all set up. Both meeting rooms, we were worried they wouldn't get used, but at the moment they are chock-a every day. In fact, we've almost reached capacity, we've found, and we're looking to shift some of the Napier ones over to Napier. So the big point there is that we don't have dedicated reception. We don't receive unscheduled inquiries. We don't have the capacity for that. We don't have staff that are in place to receive people. There is only one entrance in and out. So we do make meetings and schedule inquiries, and people are welcome to schedule inquiries to come over, but otherwise it's by appointment only. The processes were perhaps taken up most of our time, and now we get to test them. So we divided the VIC journey, as mentioned previously, I think when we were setting this up, into 4 phases, and that is the IVOC. So the first phase, which most people are in at the moment, is the information phase. We're assessing, collating and exchanging the information, and there's a lot of information. Some of the files we're sending have 300 or 400 pages of information that people have brought in to help value their properties, photos and so forth. That phase finishes when we have collated all that information, primarily after the first meeting, and then they move into the valuation phase. The valuation phase is really important that we have nothing to do with it, effectively, to maintain that independence and honesty. So once we hand over in the IVOC phase, it is the council valuation scheduled, CVS, then it drops out of our swim lane down, and we won't see it again until it pops back up, until the CAR is received, that's the council report received, and that's when we pick it back up for the offer process. Offers, we haven't tested this process yet because we're not into it, but we're not far off. The first valuation houses are getting valued this week and next week, and then we're into the offer process, so I'll be able to give you an update on that and how it goes. The completion is again something we need to work through a bit more, but that is when we get to the acquisition of the property and working out whether it's under 2 hectares, whether we're retaining the land, whether they are shifting the property off, any special requests that they have regarding demolition, things they want to save and so forth. So that's the basic 4 steps that we go through, or the 4 phases of the process. There it is in sort of a more graphic form. You can see where they enter in, go through the 4 phases. One of the important ones there is in the offer process, you'll see it's passed through an independent assessment panel. It's really an advisory panel, so that everything we do goes up and is checked that it's within the bounds of the policy as we've stipulated, or if there's any variation to the policy, that we have justified that. So again, it adds that extra layer of checks and balances in for us. Really important thing in there again is that we only deal with people that are Cat 3 residential property. We don't deal with 2As or 2Cs or 2Ps at this stage until they become Cat 3. The last bit is the support that people get the whole way through, and that is when they enter our office, they are immediately hooked up with 2 people. One is our community connector that they would have already spoken to on the phone when they first make contact with the office or would make contact with them, and the second is the assigned team member from TPG, who we call the ATM, not just because of the money they're costing. Those 2 people will maintain a relationship with the property owner from start to finish. And that way the property owner always has 2 contact points, 2 people that they can call up and ask questions about the process, or if they need any support, then the community connector is the first on hand for that. So the community connector will monitor the wellbeing, obviously, and direct property owners to the numerous services. And again, we're very lucky with our community connectors because all of them have been with us since the beginning of this process, since the cyclone, effectively. So they've got 8 months worth of experience, and they know who to redirect people towards, and they know the signs to look out for. For insurance problems, we refer them to the New Zealand Claims Resolution Service. One of the big things for us is that they have their insurance basically sorted out before they come into the office so that we can continue that smooth process. Again, it's not the owner's fault if they are in litigation with their insurance provider, but that's between them and their insurance provider. We cannot get involved in that. What's important for us is that when they come through into our office, that they have all the information, that we can make the process as fast and as smooth and as pain-free as possible. So we don't want them coming in and then waiting around for 2 years for an insurance settlement. When the process is complete and they are no longer with the buyout office, we have three options, depending on what the property owner requests. They can stay with their initial community connector that they had from before they joined us. Most of them had relationships with council community connectors and just switched over to a Cat3 community connector, so they can go back to that community connector for support. They can remain with the community connector that they established a relationship with in the buyout office, or they can go back to the wider community connectors. And again, it's only if they request that services. The considerations that we always include when we look at the offer process is timing of any settlements, any specific requests they have around demolition, any well-being, and their circumstances. So if they need a quick settlement because they're currently in temporary accommodation, all those sorts of things. So the whole journey is about listening to the property owner. It's every journey is an individual process, and that's the way that we go about it. So even though the processes are laid out to follow, the steps to follow, we adjust them as required for the individual property owner. So that's where we're at.
Thank you, David. I'd now like to call on Mayor Hazelhurst, who has a question.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Can I thank you, the team, setting this office up and how efficiently and effectively you're operating. It's really impressive. I'm really interested in to get a feel from the people that you have seen, what their feeling is about the policy that was set and just the general direction in terms of, do they consider it's fair and reasonable? Do they consider that we've looked at every aspect? So that's my first question. My second question is, I'd like to understand how the people that you have seen so far are managing with their insurers and how efficiently and effectively they've been looked after, so managing the next step of the buyout process.
Certainly, Chair. As Craig alluded to, every morning we have a quick whip to go through the meetings that we had the previous day to learn, because things will become more apparent the deeper we get into it. At the moment, we've had 7, maybe 10, 12 meetings, and each one has been different. Certainly, I mean, just this morning, which was a Napier City Council one, they were expecting the homeowner to be quite aggressive. All the conversation they've had with them up to this point has not been favourable. However, in the meeting, very happy with the process, very happy with the offer that they were getting. It is hard to define.
Yes.
And I wish I could, but there is a range of emotions. We've had people leaving in tears because they're so happy to be there, just to have the process underway. Yes. We've had people that have come in expecting more. Yes. People that are perhaps not understanding of the process as well as they could. So that's why the meetings are taking quite a long time. Initially, I guess the overall thing would be, as I alluded to before, the meetings start off a little bit adversarial, because there's a lot of distrust that's come from things they've heard or experiences they've had. But as the meetings progress, it softens out and they become a lot more accepting and a lot more congenial, I guess, and with nothing else, leaving with an understanding of what's being offered and what's on the table.
Through you, Chair, just on the, might address the eligibility. So the initial property owners that we're seeing at the moment, the officers seeing at the moment, are eligible for the policy. And so I think the conversation is more about the process, the property and the process. In terms of the policy, that will play out over the next few weeks and months as we get requests for special circumstances for those that aren't immediately eligible for the policy, and we will keep you up to date with those conversations. So this type of might be useful for thinking about this kind of the mistrust and the frustration and the anxiety and then understanding the process versus the eligibility, which we'll start to dig into over the next few weeks, I'm sure.
The insurers, the major sticking point at the moment seems to be EQC. Most of the insurance companies are pretty good, and there has been a reluctance on some people. The questions asking, why do I need to reveal my insurance and details and so forth? And so I'm sure if everybody aware, as part of the process is that we agreed with the Insurance Council of New Zealand and all the insurers the homeowners or property owners receive a letter from the insurance company which outlines all the insurance that is being paid out and for what purpose. However, the figure that is presented is only the figure that relates to the residential part of the dwelling. It doesn't include money that's been paid out for temporary accommodation and things like that. But obviously we need that information before we can formulate an offer. That's one of the two key components that go into that. So usually that is resolved fairly quickly. We've had a couple come in who weren't really aware of EQC, and then all of a sudden it's wavy. We've seen EQC and they haven't. So we are in the process of trying to connect with EQC a bit more and say, can you please speed things up a bit, because there are some homeowners that are waiting for that.
Awesome.
Through you, Chair. I must say we've got a very close relationship with the Insurance Council of New Zealand, and they are they've been wonderful, and so that part is working really well. So we can pick up the phone straight away and say, hey, this is what we're seeing and hearing. Can we get your support in sorting that out? And so far they've been very responsive. We have heard that Hawke's Bay is actually a dream to deal with relative to others. So that's also useful feedback.
Thank you. Moving on now to Councillor Hickey.
Kia ora, and just through the chair, just a couple of questions. So currently we're having hui with those who are insured only? No, the
uninsured
as well?
Uninsured as well. The only difference being is they don't have to have their insurance sorted out before they.
Yeah, kapai. That's good. And second thing is, because I have spoken to somebody who is uninsured and knew nothing about it, and the reason being is he no longer lives on the premise, obviously, and hasn't contacted anybody, and is currently living with a family member on the other side of Napier. So how do we engage with, because it was just by chance, how do we, or what are we doing to engage with those that are kind of in limbo?
Please let us know.
Okay.
Me and David know. I mean, we have, through the process before the voluntary buyout offer started, we have tried very hard in order to contact each of those property owners. There will be some property owners who didn't get letters. We know there have been bounce back emails, so there definitely will be a clutch of property owners who may not have that information. So if you are aware of that, let us know. That'd be great.
There will be an owner coming in and using my name as a reference to say I said. So thank you very much for that.
I'm glad to hear the community's using their councillors so effectively. Thank you, Councillor Hickey. Do we have any other questions? Oh, Councillor Corbyn.
Just as a follow-up to that, do we have any idea how many people are in that category that are unaware?
I don't have the figures to hand, but we can certainly, if it's of interest, come back to you with how many bounce backs we've got and how many letters we eventually had to send out, but I don't have it to hand.
Thank you. It'd be interesting to know, but also what the plan is to try and contact them if it is bouncing back, not getting through, etc.
Thank you, Councillor Corbyn. Any other questions or comments? No? Okay, we have recommendations on...
So I was going to say happy to recommend if...
Thank you, Councillor Hickey, for moving the recommendations. Can I have a second? Thank you, Councillor Nixon. If there's no other comments or debate, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you, that's carried. Thank you, team. I'd like to acknowledge your compassion, pragmatism and professionalism around this really important piece of work, so thank you. All right, we're moving on now to item 9, which is the future growth update, and I'd like to welcome the team forward to report on that. Okay, welcome team. This is another significant piece of work, so we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Through you, Madam Chair, Councillor Butto and Councillor Corbyn are on this regional joint committee. If they want to add anything, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and kia ora koutou to everyone. So the future development strategy. I guess we're talking about the overall future growth program, but core component which I'm definitely involved with is the future development strategy, which, just to give a really brief overview, I'm sure most of you are aware of it already, but it's a collaborative partnership or collaborative strategy between the Napier City Council, Hastings, HBRC and 3 PSGEs that are representing the urban area and the urban study area. So just to go through where we have got to in the process at this stage, we've been doing a lot of background work which has culminated in a issues and options paper. That took into account all of the constraints, and that's obviously the hazards. Everyone's aware of obviously Cyclone Gabriel coming into account, and the soils, as well as cultural impacts, and anything that may constrain development over the study area. And we've also done a demand and capacity analysis to determine the amount of dwellings that would be needed over the 30-year strategy period. So, as I mentioned, the issues and options report has been, it's still a draft report, but it's mainly finalised to basically, it's remained draft in case through the consultation period we've had to change it or anything like that. But this is what we have gone out to the public with. Primarily in the, there's been sort of 2 tranches of work that has occurred from that process. The first was the call for opportunities. That's where we went out to all of the development community, as well as any landowners that had previously shown interest or provided a site that may have interest in development. And basically we have gathered input of any of these sites that have been put forward. Just to be very clear on that, just because the sites were put forward doesn't mean it's definitely going to be considered. They have to go through it's basically a matrix where we sort of go through how they fit in and how they go against the opportunities and the constraints, and also that not all of those sites are just specific sites. We are looking into areas where growth could occur. So I think we got in over 150, so there's a lot of sites to look through and look through the process and basically go through, as I said, the matrix to look at the pros and cons of each individual site. From there, we have basically started in the last week or so the full public engagement. So that's where we've gone out and seen, hopefully everyone's seen the Facebook and that sort of things, and we've got the pop-up shop open this week, as well as going, we had a very good public workshop where we sent out invites to a range of like the fruit growers and Save Our Plains, and as well as developers and consultants and everything. And I think we pretty much filled up the pop-up shop, and we wouldn't have wanted too many more people, otherwise we would have had to been flowing out the door, but it worked very well. And we've had a lot of interest in the pop-up shop as well over the course of the week. Just to mention that we had hoped to do that earlier, but just with the cyclone zoning process and all the consultation going around that, we pushed it out slightly to make sure that everyone could be fully engaged. And finally, yeah, iwi engagement has been ongoing. We're in constant contact with the PSGs. They're also part of the joint committee, but yes, we, keeping them updated and hopefully keeping them updated more as we go through the process to make sure that their input continues every step of the way.
Just to add a couple of other elements there too. Yesterday we met with the joint committee in terms of bringing together all of the information that Craig's just talked about, and trying to put it in some different scenarios as to how the development footprint might look or could look. So that was, I think that was a really worthwhile exercise, and the feedback that we got from the committee was very supportive of the process that we are going to follow from now. So I think it's important to just talk through the timeframes around what we're planning now. So what we're going to be looking at is developing a preferred scenario, keeping in touch with the joint committee as we work through that, and then in February of next year, we'll be bringing that preferred scenario back for further deliberations with the joint committee. I guess it's also fair to say that we need to keep councillors informed in terms of that process as well. So we want to make sure that everyone's informed, everyone is aware of the process that we're undertaking, because we do have quite tight time frames. We have to go through a special consultative procedure, which can be quite lengthy, and we are still trying to dovetail into October next year to have the first FDS adopted. So we've still got a lot of work to do.
Are there any comments or questions? Councillor Nixon.
I appreciate this is very much directed towards urban and industrial activity. But I heard a report on Radio New Zealand this morning talking about the state of our rural economy across the whole country. Our dairy has been very weak and so on. But one thing that caught my attention is the suggestion that, or the statement that apple exports in the past year were down 20% as a direct result of the cyclone effect. And knowing that areas like Dartmoor and the Esk may not return to their previous activity levels, has that featured anywhere in, or is it going to feature anywhere in our thinking? Will we sort of try and extrapolate that into the distance to see if it's a permanent change or just a bump along the way? Where does that feature? How does that get in here?
I would say it's a very good question. Council doesn't have anything in its work plan at the moment to look specifically at its rural areas. However, I would say that most of our strategic planning effort at the moment with our other councils is either in recovery or it's in the future urban development strategy. That's something we have to do. However, at a staff level, and we shared this with the Rural Community Board a little while back, there is some thinking about whether we should be advancing some conversation around what this council's role is or shouldn't be in strategic planning for our rural areas. Acknowledging this was before Cyclone Gabrielle, that rural areas are facing a lot more challenges than perhaps we're used to. There's the changing economics and climate resilience, and communities are changing as well. And so you are getting a memo later on today to say that we've been successful in getting some pro bono consultancy work from a company called Allen & Clark to do a bit of a scoping study on strategic planning for our rural areas in the future. And as part of that, there'll be a very targeted short survey of rural community members, rural community boards, other people, sector sector people, not at the governance level, but at the sort of ground level, just to see what people out there think are the big challenges coming along, even post-Gabriel recovery, just to understand that. So that'll be a report that comes back sometime in the new year. So we'll actually start talking about this a little bit more, but at present, no. But I would say that that process needs to be aligned with the recovery, but the recovery must continue.
Yeah, I agree. I hear you. What I would like to do is know for sure that we have some continuous monitoring process so that if there are any implications from these sort of changes, that, yeah, it gets into the system.
Thank you, Councillor Nixon. Would you like to respond?
Yes, so there's a couple of levels there. So councillors may recall, as part of your FDS process, we have to go through formal capacity assessment investigations, both residentially focused and across your industrial, commercial zones as well, I guess on the commercial side of the equation. They are really complex investigative processes. I think I'm not expert in any of them, but it's a combination of economists' work, planning work, various other forecasting. I guess from the lens from Council's FDS point of view is to try and build a picture of those longer term demand drivers on your industrial and commercial land requirements. So, for example, obviously a big influencer in our commercial and industrial development over the last 5 years has been the massive increase in horticulture related, cool stores and processing facilities are probably 40% or more of your development in Irongate. So I think we have to do those assessments every 3 years, isn't it, Mark? So there's a rigorous interrogation of your industry trends and forecasts. So that's really on your FDS planning. Then you have to overlay all of that with your national policy statement. So obviously we have to have your policy statement on urban development. Council, as a planning enabler, has to try and facilitate a 20% inventory margin, as in there's surplus supply to demand in each of those segments, whether it's housing or industrial space or commercial space, to keep the price drivers on land as de-stressed as possible. So again, we need to be cognizant of where we think those demand pain points are going to be going forward. So that's I guess on your regional district planning side of the equation. Council and its LTP has a strong strategic focus on enabling a strong economy and good quality economic growth and development. And that's a theme coming through the team's work on your recovery framework. So it's understanding there's work going on at the moment, how council fits in as local government with your various sector organisations and industry groups. What's our role in enabling and advancing the economic prosperity of each of those segments? And it seems at the moment we play an important role both in the provision of economic information, local government being an active lobbyer on part of the local economy, and working in with your various industry organisations to advocate and promote, and the flip side too, trying to promote on an evidence base and a good marketing base that Hastings District is open for business and welcomes that investment, underpinning your good quality growth aspirations that you're after. And then obviously we invest that $800 million into the infrastructure to keep everything moving, which is, I guess, council's direct influence on your not only economic growth but sustainability of what you already have.
Thank you.
Just a quick addition to that on the monitoring that you were talking about. The MPI do both industry and regional sector outlook papers, which are very good for getting that sort of monitoring and intelligence out into the system. The other thing I would mention is for a number of years, Council, through the Mayor, has convened a primary producers roundtable or sector group chairs and regional council and other people to talk about issues that are occurring in the horticultural and the rural sector, both long-term and short-term. Unfortunately, it hasn't met since COVID, and then Cyclone Gabrielle, it's been not an appropriate time to do that, but that's another vehicle for doing that monitoring they're talking about.
Excellent, thank you. Moving on to Councillor Bardo.
Thank you. My understanding is basically the future events for Chi is about council enabling capacity, no matter what form that takes, no matter what industry that's for. The workshop that was held, was it yesterday? Tuesday? That was really interesting. It was my first look into it, and it was lovely to go through those scenarios and understand the way we're going about the thinking. Some of the scenarios feel challenging and confronting when you're presented with them, and that's, to be honest, a good thing. It's about understanding the opportunity costs involved in terms of, if we go with this preferred scenario, what is it we're losing out on and what is it that we're gaining? So good to see that coming through, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bardo. Councillor Apatu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try and keep my question concise because it's... So bear with me. When I read the paper alludes to gathering population data to assess housing capacity and housing demand. Plan Change 5 alludes to the right homes in the right places. When we gather our population data, do we look at projections of numbers increasing, etc.? I suppose, how far down do we drill? I'm a little bit interested to look at the composition of those households that we might plan towards. Māori and Pacifica having younger, larger families, non-Māori Pacifica having smaller families and ageing. Do we drill down to that level so that we can be a bit more targeted or focused about where our housing market can meet our local need? Phew.
Well done, Councillor Apatu.
On the demand side, yes, to a certain degree. The housing capacity assessment that was done in 2021 based on 2020 data that's being updated for this, but it's only being updated at a high level. But the 2021 one was down to some considerable detail around a lot of the housing demographics of people, of Māori in particular, and affordability and all of those sorts of things. It's an incredibly full report of very complex data, but it's good to see that the economists that do this do really get into breaking it down as far as they can. On the supply side, it's actually not easy to actually be that precise about matching it because there's so many other market influences involved.
Excellent question, Councillor Apatu.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments? No, thank you. We have a recommendation on page 55.
There's more.
Oh, there's more. Sorry. I headed you off at the pass. Carry on.
Yeah, so I guess that was a major piece of work, but just quickly on the regional spatial strategy. We have reported before there is a draft scoping report that has been being undertaken for the regional spatial strategy that's been being undertaken by Bill Wasley and Shad Rolleston. So that covers a larger area than the FDS. This is looking regional wide, and it also covers a greater area of like the full well-beings and that side of things. The draft scoping report has by and large been completed and has been looked at by sort of the TAG group. It is still waiting for input from what we call the Te Kupunga group, which is well, Dr. James, well, he's still here, but and Charlie's, plus their similar representatives from the other councils. And so we just want them to be able to put their input in it before we move on to getting wider input onto that draft scoping. And so I guess this is just to be aware, it is just the scoping report about how we would potentially undertake the regional spatial strategy. I guess the other key input into this is that the Spatial Planning Act did get implemented by government in, I think it was about a month ago, might have been August. But obviously there's a little bit of a state of flux there with the new government coming in and discussions around the what they're going to do with the RM reforms. So that's just to be aware of that.
Councillor Always Corbyn.
I'm always asking a question. The question is the timeframes for the future development strategy and the regional spatial strategy. How are they aligned?
So the future development strategy was required to be finalised as part of the long-term plan process. So it was originally for June next year, which we have pushed out due to the cyclone to October. The regional spatial strategy is far longer timeframes, and basically there's 10 years to implement these in the MBEAs into each authority. So it's a far wider and it's a far larger process as well. Obviously there'll be more, of the iwi and the PSGEs involved in that side of things, plus additional councils.
So the government did intend a staged rollout of spatial planning throughout the regions, with a few first regions being learning regions for the rest to understand. But as I say, with the change of government, we're not quite sure where this is going to go. It's speculation about whether they'll keep it or whether they'll keep it in a modified form or disengage it from the rest of the RMA reforms. We just need to wait and see now.
Thank you. Naya?
Kia ora. Just to comment really, and put on the record and be total transparent. I know we always get asked iwi input, review, tangata whenua through all these stages, but I just want to highlight this position, on my opinion, my professional opinion, working for tangata whenua in this planning space. So we've got future development strategy, regional spatial strategy, then the natural and built environmental plans. So in my opinion, it's a bit backwards, at least for tangata whenua. And I'm happy for anyone working for tangata whenua to have a debate about this, but the reason being, and I think we've just highlighted with Cyclone Gabrielle, where we're going through the space of, I guess, better planning in light of natural environmental considerations and risks, is the risk is we do a development strategy and these wish lists without considering the context of pretty much we could create the same problems we created in the past without thinking about our environmental or natural limitations on where best to build our infrastructure. So I would have the NBA natural and built environment plans first within that, a bottom line limit framework as opposed to a wish list with what we want. And as I heard previously talking about a total focus on the economics. If you go backwards, you might have things like where we put our power plant in a floodplain, or we develop our toto over there without that full comprehensive plan of the limitations of our natural environment. I know this is a statutory process with timelines and it's already been set, but we provided these comments about these changes to the natural built environment as our substantive input in the whole picture, and then we get lumped with this. So it's just highlighting, yep, we have to go through this timeline process, but we've got that cyclone which has happened, which by default has caused a rethink, not a rethink, so pause with those considerations, which we should have had those considerations prior. It's just that it was forced in, basically rammed down our throat that we have to have those. So it's a little bit of I told you so, we should think about those things first, even if they didn't happen, but we had the worst case scenario, it did. So hopefully you understand that, and then when we're being asked for tangata whenua to provide input, we're, in my opinion, already within a compromise framework to an extent. So that puts more onus, if we're going to participate in this stage process and that timeline, that we have to be more considerate to our environmental limitations on how we structure and build infrastructure. And I know there's a strong wish list to pump the economy up, but we don't want to. We want to be more conscientious and not create further potential problems. And one last example I'll highlight, which we had our annual environmental conference, and we invited those from Greater Wellington. It was an investment in buying property where they spent maybe 400 million on buying property next to the river, because they saw it as an investment, because if a flood were to happen, that'll be $1 billion worth of damage. So a lot of kōrero was like, no, we can't afford it, but can you afford the alternative? And we've just had an example of the alternative. So
Thank you for that
that's
reminder.
just my comment. Kia ora.
Appreciate that reminder, Naya. Thank you. Do we have any other questions before we move on to the next part? No? Thank you, team.
Growth infrastructure, great subject. Look, just in terms of a quick update, I'm starting to develop the Essential Services Development Plan, which is the next construct of what we will potentially build in terms of infrastructure, following on from the constraints report. It has to be informed by the outcomes of the FDS, and in particular our local area planning, and you'll hear about that from Rebecca shortly, so that we have an integrated program. We are targeting our infrastructure investment in the areas that need it first, and in the meantime developing that longer term plan around our investment and where it will happen across the wider extent of the network. This also includes transportation as well. So it's a great opportunity to leverage off the core infrastructure that we're commencing to build now, so that we can maximise that benefit, but at the same time we're targeting our focus to areas where we know we will get the best bang for the buck. And we've talked previously about stormwater being a significant constraint. The strategy will develop what has to happen at a property level, how it integrates with solutions at a street level, and then how we are managing flood risk, both in an urban sense, and then how do we get it away from people and properties as quickly as possible. So really comprehensive, quite excited in terms of the team that we're gathering around us to work on that, and we will bring updates to you as we move in that space. In terms of the core infrastructure that Mr. Hansen's working on at the moment, shortly we'll be going out to tender, so prior to the end of this year, going out to tender with the first parts of work in terms of pipe laying. So that should be commencing February and March of next year. So we've moved quite quickly, excuse me, moving through the process of where it's going to go to now starting to put the wheels in motion around getting it in the ground. And a key focus being on the HDST development off the bottom end of Flaxmere. So that's all dovetailing together quite nicely. Other good news is that I'm compiling the first of our claims back to IAF, so we'll be getting some significant first package of money through the door, which is great. And we've also been in discussion with Kaingaora, about the impacts of inflationary pressures, cost increases for construction and all of those sorts of things. And while they are saying, no, there's no more money, I think there potentially could be an opportunity to have a different type of discussion, particularly if we're making significant progress to support and enable housing. So we'll just see how those discussions pan out. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Councillor Corbin.
Yes, I'm interested in what constraints means, and that the constraint to me means something that can't be overcome. Obstacle is something that is there but can be overcome. And I'm just wondering whether that report is obstacles or constraints.
Well, we think of constraints as limitations. If you've got a constraint of the network, it may not mean that it's at capacity, but it's close to capacity such that if you have more bums on seats, you've heard me talk about bums on seats, then you're increasing the risk to a level that's not tolerable to either ourselves or the community. So a constraint says we have an issue here, the Essential Service Development Plan is the solution to those constraints. So it's just a technical term that we use around capacity.
Yeah, so there could be obstacles that will be overcome in the Essential Services Plan.
Yeah, obstacles or constraints, yeah.
Thank you.
limitations.
Okay, if there's no other questions. One more person. Cool.
So yeah, just an update on Plan Change 5. So obviously it went through notification earlier in the year, and we got a number of submissions. I believe it was around 130 for the original one, 118 with 26 further submissions. Unfortunately, as we've reported previously, there was some information missing when the plan change got notified and got put on online, which meant that we had to re-notify it. And so in terms of a update in terms of the further submissions, there was 33 additional submissions and six further submissions on that. So that happened in July. Basically, to look at the process that we are now looking at moving forward, we are currently undertaking our analysis of those submissions. We're looking at, by and large, closing that and having that finished, finalised before the end of the year, leading into a hearing that is, I think it is now proposed for very early in April. It's just a matter of managing to get everyone on the commissioners being able to make the same date, and I believe we've got Bill Wasley as well being a commissioner on that. So yeah, just a really quick update on that process. The submissions were by and large, obviously, as you would expect, a lot of the residents are not so supportive, particularly around the social issues, whereas I guess some of the developers and government organisations are quite keen to expand on what we've already got. So just a really simple overlay, but there's a lot more submission points and quite a large task to work through, which we're doing at the moment.
Thank you for that update. Any questions on that particular item? No? Great. Well, on that basis, we have a recommendation on page 55. Can I please have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Nixon. Thank you, Councillor Corbin. All those in favour? Any against? Thank you, that's carried. We'll now move on to item 10, which is the Local Area Plans Programme Design and Commencement, and welcome Rebecca to present to us.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay. Yeah. While we wait, I'm Rebecca Sutton. I've presented to a number of you previously. I'm the program manager for the local area plans here in Hastings. Through the chair, I'll just run through a quick presentation for you today, just giving you a bit of an overview and summary of the program. So what we'll be looking to cover today, like I say, I'll give you a brief context and background to the local area plan program. I think it's pretty critical to just canvass with you what we are talking about exactly when we are talking about medium density housing, because that's quite a fundamental component to the program. Then we'll move to the identification of the local areas and finish up with the approach to and commencement of the program. So to give you a quick context where the local area plan program sits, as you've just had a presentation on, there is the future development strategy, which looks at Hastings district as a whole, plus Napier, and the area of the two local areas. So we have the existing Hiratonga Plains development strategy, otherwise known as HPUDs, which has identified existing greenfields areas that are deemed to be urban, whether or not they are developed or not. And as part of the overall growth strategy for the region, intensification is a significant part of how we grow into the future, But those high-level strategies remain largely silent on how we best achieve that intensification. Moving down to the operative district plan, which most of you will be quite familiar with, that is essentially the rulebook for specific site developments, what's to be expected and where on a individual site, and particular development controls that have to be adhered to when you are looking to develop a site. So the local area plans kind of bridges that gap between the high level growth strategy. It provides the overall blueprint to growth at the neighbourhood scale, so the local scale. It gives direction really for the operative district plan to look to implement the overall intention of growth at a neighbourhood scale. So the urban growth picture. Now these figures are taken from the 2001 Housing Capacity Assessment. They are the latest publicly available figures. So the housing bottom lines is how many houses do we need to build in the short, medium and long term. So looking at the medium term, so to 2030, we're looking at 3,270 dwellings in the urban areas of Hastings. And then if you flip, yep, thank you. With 60% of these houses to be provided within the existing urban areas. So that is covering off both your brownfields and your greenfields. Again, just focusing in on that medium term, I think that's the most appropriate figure to be using. Long term is going to be really significantly affected by population predictions and the changes that come from that. Short term, you'll note that we're already in 2023. So I think the medium term is where we need to be targeting our efforts moving forward in terms of getting, understanding how many dwellings are actually being built and how many we actually need to be providing for. So within the growth in urban areas, as I've just discussed, if we jump down to greenfields, that is, as it sounds, it's greenfield, so it's new. Everything needs to be provided. So all your three waters infrastructure, your roading, your subdivision, what your lot sizes look like, that's really kind of dealt with through the higher level strategies. Again, the Heretaunga Plains Urban Development Strategy, which will then be replaced by the Future Development Strategy. So for the purposes of the local area plan program, I'm focused on brownfields, and that is essentially redevelopment of existing sites. You've got your above and below ground infrastructure already in place, so in terms of your water, your stormwater and your wastewater, but there is a very high likelihood that that existing infrastructure is somewhat constrained. You already have houses that are discharging into the wastewater network. Can those existing networks provide for additional housing, or do they need to be upgraded? So that's kind of the key difference between the brownfields and the greenfields. And the local area plans are specifically targeted at the brownfields redevelopment areas. So again, that brownfields kind of splits into two ways to address growth within a brownfields environment. Firstly, you've got your traditional infill development, and I think that's the scenario that's most common in Hastings. Predominantly, it's the addition of one extra house on your site. Sometimes that can extend to two additional lots. And traditionally that has been by far the most popular and common approach. There's a number of reasons for that. Firstly, it's fairly accessible to, say, mum and dad developers or people that are just wanting to, clear their mortgage, add another house. You generally can either continue to rent the existing house or live in it while you develop your site. So that's kind of two of the main reasons why infill's been most popular. Most of the time you don't even need to move the existing house on the site. It just stays there and you add another one. And then we've got our medium density developments. That's your redevelopment of site to, say, 3+ dwellings. and uptake to date of this development option has been extremely limited in the Hastings context. With the main reasons being for that, obviously you lose the ability to continue to live in and or rent the existing house on the site if you need to remove that to replace it with 3 or more houses. So there's obviously a cost associated with that. It requires a bit more input in the design phase and considerably more capital to do it, noting that you're generally taking off the initial house and then replacing it with multiples. And obviously that also can be somewhat constrained where you do have capacity limitations under the existing infrastructure that's servicing that site. So that's kind of the main reasons why medium density hasn't been potentially so popular. It's just not as easy to do. Doesn't mean it can't be done though. So next slide. So this kind of leads me quite nicely into what is medium density housing. So a very brief definition is that it's a household unit equivalent, so basically a house of any type that occupies a net site size of between 150 square metres and 350 square metres. And that is actually at its most base kind of definition. It is literally just a numerical ratio house to land area size. So the next question is, what exactly does this look like? And the answer to that is it very much depends. Medium density development can and is encouraged to include a range of housing typologies. So I'll lead you on now to some images. These are predominantly taken from the Napier city area. So just looking at these two, the left and bottom images there are the old Port Ahuriri Bowling Club, part of that site. That has been redeveloped into 10, well, is going to be redeveloped into 10 detached comprehensively designed dwellings. The bottom picture there will be another 2 of those. They're termed boat houses, but they are all completely detached from each other. But if you can just imagine that picture with an extra two of them in the line. And then the image to the left is there's 4 of those kind of larger but only 2-storey dwellings, 2 in the front to Battery Road and then 2 out the back. So that's 10 on that site. And then the top right picture, that's kind of more of an example of just how comprehensively designed dwellings look. Those are 2 separate dwellings on 2 separate sites. They don't actually meet the definition of medium density in a numerical fashion because you'll see up the back there, those cliffs are actually part of those sites. They're completely unusable, very steep. They don't add anything, any particular livable value to those sites. But yeah, that is just one little nuance to kind of understand. But if you took away that back half of the site, that's for all intents and purposes what 3-storey medium density housing could and would look like. So that's the detached dwellings that can be achieved in a medium density context. And then we've got our attached typologies. Now these are also, the top one is on Battery Road in Napier. That's 10 homes, 2 rows of 5 on 2,150 square metres. Vehicle access is around the back of those as well, so they front quite nicely to the street. Those are living areas that are fronting the street there. So what that equates to is 1 household unit equivalent per 215 square metres. So, you know, that is fairly dense, and that is really representative of the capacity that we are aiming for in our wastewater modelling. To understand how much extra capacity we need to add to the network to accommodate dwellings down to 1 to 200. That's still not a minimum. When we're talking medium density, we are talking down to 150. Appreciating that as neighbourhoods grow organically, there will always be unders and overs. You will always have some that will stick closer to the 1 household unit equivalent per 300, and then the occasional one will drop down to 150. So if we're looking at providing capacity for one household unit equivalent per 200 square metres, we're on pretty safe ground in terms of providing for future growth. That next example down is on Harding Road. That's 4 homes across 2 titles. Those 2 titles equate to 778. So again, that's the type of outcome with on-site parking that you can achieve, 1 household unit per 195 square metres. So I don't think there would be too much argument to say that they detract from the amenity of their local areas. Move on. Then we've got duplex homes, so semi-detached, aka 1 shared wall. That example on the right-hand side is just down on Karamu Road as part of a, I think there was 3 duplex units on that site, so 6 dwellings. And the one on the left is yet to commence building, and that is what is proposed down on Tomoana Road. So, even though most of those examples were from the Napier context, I just really wanted to introduce how this may look and feel within the Hastings context. Medium density housing is definitely not new in Hastings. This is Roberts Street. It fronts to Cornwall Park in Mahora, and I think we can all agree, looking at that streetscape, that that's well vegetated. It's it's got a lovely character, well situated, and if you go to the next slide, that is the density that is achieved in that streetscape from that picture that I just previously showed you. So across those 8 land parcels, there's 1 household unit equivalent per 324 square metres. When you go down to one of those sites with 4 household units on it, it drops down to 1 to 253 square metres. So you can see there is a lot of land lost to driveways as opposed to outdoor living areas in that context. All of those dwellings are attached, either terraced front to back or just one wall shared. But I think we can all agree that looking at the street frontage of that archetypal medium density neighbourhood, there's no question that there is a very high level of amenity in that streetscape, and yet the household unit equivalents we're getting down to 1 to 250. So medium density housing is not new. This is all really firmly established development in this area. That currently experiences a high degree of amenity and an entirely cognizant streetscape to that of the rest of Hastings, I would argue. So my key takeaway to this is medium density is certainly not something to be scared of. It's not the density per se that can lead to issues, it's the design of those houses and how that works, both at a site scale and then at a larger scale at a neighbourhood level, which is where the local area plans kind of come into play. Okay, so that was kind of medium density development in a nutshell. Obviously quite closely linked in with the design guide that is currently sitting adjacent to Plan Change 5, but we can talk further about that. So the local area plans, place-based approach. So this gives you an overall picture of the 6 identified areas that are suitable to support intensification of residential density. So our priority 1 areas are Stortford Lodge, you'll see there with a 1 to the north of the CBD, Hiratonga Street East to the south of the CBD, and then Mahora. And then moving down to our priority 2 areas, we've got Frimley, which is the top centre, number 2, Orareka, which is adjacent to Stortford Lodge, down to the southwest, and Camberley up to the northwest of that picture. So then the first priority areas, Stortford Lodge and Hiratonga Street East will be the first two local area plans that will commence preparation. The rationale for that is that these two areas share a common boundary with the Central Business District, which is the key commerce and retail anchor of the district. And then Mahora is also a priority 1 area. However, there are a few additional challenges that come with Mahora that require additional assessment. The first is the existing character residential zoning that applies to the majority of Mahora. That, and if I can direct you to figure 1 in the report, it is slightly outside the 400 metre radius from the primary commercial zones, which is basically the CBD, the large format retail and the commercial services zones. However, it is still identified as a priority 1 area because there is an existing level of service afforded by the local shops in that area that is greater than the other areas' suburban commercial zonings. So yes, Mahora is a priority 1 area, but no, it will not be one of the first two local area plans that commences preparation.
If we could just, would you like to take questions as we're going, or would you like us to wait until the end?
Happy either way.
Okay. Councillor Dixon, I realise you're having some microphone issues. Maybe if you'd like to borrow one of your neighbours.
Thank you, Rebecca. Just wondering about Stortford Lodge and Hiratonga East. Are you going to do them in conjunction with each other, or are you going to do them consecutively after each other?
No, together at the same time.
You're doing them both at the same time?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Councillor Nixon.
I feel as I'm living on a ranch and I should be grazing sheep. The first few pictures you showed, 3-storey buildings, which I think were in Napier. Does going to 3 stories add any additional requirements? Like I always understood in Napier, if you went over 2 stories, you had to provide an escalator, elevator or lift, but maybe that isn't correct, I don't know. That's always been my understanding. So does it pose any additional complications?
I think I might call on Mr. Shaughnessy to answer that.
Myself and Rowan Wallace wrote those provisions for those housing areas, and they have a density down to 120 square metres you can get down to, but it's really a building code matter. So what some people will do, will put a stair in, but they will also have a kind of a shaft big enough for one of those water lifts, and it all depends on the market they're heading for. So, it meets all the normal building requirements. You've got to have the fire rating between them, but a lot of developers future-proof them by putting the ability for older folk to be able to use them by having one of those, they call them water lifts that can go up and down the building.
Yep. So that's fine. I just didn't know what the situation was.
Thank you. Okay, we'll carry on with the presentation if that suits.
Yeah. Yep. Right. Okay, so we've got our 6 areas identified with our first 3 priority 1 areas, or 1A in the case of Mahora. So I guess the next understanding to talk through is the approach that we're taking to the local area plans. So the main goal is to increase the share of medium density housing as part of wider place-based neighbourhood planning. So that is to try and move away from those single additional household unit developments, to have defined medium density area zones where it is not only anticipated but actively encouraged for higher density dwellings and developments to be undertaken in those areas. There is a very real opportunity with the local area plans being a non-statutory document to engage and consult with those the people within those neighbourhoods and local areas to grow community understanding and acceptance of the need for increased residential density and the benefits that can be achieved through growth in residential areas, through infrastructure upgrades and perceptible benefits within those particular communities. The wider approach includes consideration of above and below ground infrastructure. So it's your three waters, transport and amenity open spaces, as well as land uses and community services. So it really is a holistic look at how neighbourhoods function, all the different aspects and work streams that feed into successful neighbourhoods. You know, you can't provide for growth if you're not going to upgrade the infrastructure. And as part of that infrastructure conversation, we are talking about our streetscapes and the transport networks. We are talking about our amenity open spaces. We are talking about access to schools and alternative ways to get to school instead of always the private car. So it is really quite holistic in its approach, and there is, you know, a lot of flexibility afforded in that consultation and engagement phase with the community, because we're not constrained by a legislated process like, say, a plan change. So that's the approach. I'm really wanting to engage early and meaningfully with those local communities, knowing that there is a lot of anxiety about medium density housing, that, you know, perhaps examples in the past haven't been so wonderful, but there are so many examples of really good medium density housing, of which those pictures are just a select few examples.
I just want to add to this discussion, because Rebecca and I have had many discussions around amenity, and what we're really wanting to engage with is the existing community as well, because we're trying to develop a plan for the future, but we have to recognise the existing community may have doubts, and you know, there are significant benefits that can come from an integrated plan, and that's really our job, is to try and you know, engage with those communities and educate them such that they can understand those benefits. They don't necessarily have to engage in implementing medium density themselves, but we want to protect the existing community as much as possible so that they don't feel like they're just being squeezed out, and you know, this is about building a better future where they currently live.
Thank you for that. Councillor Fowler.
Thank you. Obviously, as part of, through your chair, part of this process, there will be some quite rigid design requirements that might put the community at ease in terms of what may be or not going next to them. Would be the case?
Yes. The local area plans is very much about defining an area where medium density is anticipated. You know, at the moment, it's a bit of a scattergun approach to growth, which isn't serving anyone really in terms of efficient distribution of infrastructure upgrades, for one, and like you say, that surprise factor of what can happen next door. By really clearly defining areas and making sure that the zoning reflects the intention, which is where Plan Change 5 comes in. And then as part of Plan Change 5 as well, they're looking at taking the design the design framework and making that an integral part of the district plan, so it's no longer voluntary, so to speak. So that is kind of where we're going with these identified neighbourhoods. This is where medium density is expected and where it is anticipated, and then you would look to the district plan to understand exactly what 3D envelope that looks like.
John?
Just to follow on from that point, when Craig was talking before and he talked about commissioners, he was referring to those councillors that have their qualifications. So that Plan Change 5 will be coming through for you to hear. So in terms of how restrictive or how tight you want to go, those decisions will be coming through to you in April next year. So for those councillors who've got their ticket, I'm just getting in before Christine sends out the new dates. So please don't organise holidays in that period. Thank you.
Thank you for that heads up. Do you have any follow-up?
Just an aside through chair. Just by coincidence, I'm doing a small project for a group that wants me to speak on the development of Hastings, and this is just really an extension of what's been happening, but just getting smaller. So it's quite interesting seeing the big blocks, the smaller ones, and just so.
maybe you could include the Fitzroy development that Bruce did, you know, down by the park, and it came up beautifully well. They restored an old Art Deco house, and they put medium density right around it. So the council did that themselves a few years back, and a lot of people forget that, you know, it's actually done. The council itself did a really good job of that.
As an aside, it'll be interesting to see when the Plan Change 5 submissions do come through, whether or not it's been picked up by those who have submitted, the fact that the design guide will become the design framework and really firm up better design outcomes. I have interrupted your presentation. Carry on.
Okay, nearly there. Okay, so as I say, we're really looking at quite a holistic approach to the local area plans. It's integrated and it's proactive as well. We're looking to really implement some fairly significant changes, lead by example, and really provide for the growth that we are wanting people to take the opportunity to develop, really. So a key aspect of the program is to identify your necessary infrastructure improvements and the associated co-benefits available from those infrastructure improvements. And what I mean by that is where, you know, if there's potentially a stormwater issue, we really want to be looking at, is there an innovative way that we can proceed with those upgrades that would then, you know, have better visual outcomes for the transport corridor. You know, do we add swales? Do we add not necessarily rain gardens, but additional permeable surfaces in the roading corridor, which then has the co-benefit of improving the stormwater? You know, all these interconnected things that traditionally they've been, if you need your wastewater upgrade, you dig up the road and you upgrade your wastewater. You know, we really want to be looking at what we can be doing to get efficiencies across all the infrastructure, both above and below ground. So what that's going to look like for each local area is identifying a betterment project, which is specific to each local area. So an example of that, of course, in Stortford Lodge would be a integrated upgrade of Hiratonga Street West. So instead of just a normal roading upgrade, you know, we'll be looking to increase the capacity of the three water networks, you know, change the look and feel of Hiratonga Street West, add some vegetative amenity, add some like separate cycleways, footpaths, you know, very early stages, but those are the types of things that we're looking at in each local area, which will result in a demonstrable increase in amenity for those communities. You know, it's something that they can touch, they can see as part of the implementation of the local area plans. So where we go to from here, we're beginning to commence work on engagement drafts for Stortford Lodge and Hiratonga Street East local area plans. And as part of that engagement, you know, we're looking at other examples around New Zealand. Porirua has been identified as one that has a similar demographic to Hastings, where comprehensive medium density developments have been implemented. So we're looking to really talk to all the different stakeholders of those projects, from the developer perspective to the purchaser perspective to the local government perspective in terms of both regulatory and growth. And also, so that's kind of one aspect of the community engagement that we'll be doing. And it's also now necessary to prepare a framework and work program as to how best to pursue the community engagement of those local areas.
Question for me, in the absence of Mayor Sandra, who's had to step out, I know she's particularly passionate about stunning Stortford, and just interested to understand the betterment projects. Is that something that's council directed, or during that engagement process is the community invited to have input into what they would like?
Both, really. Certainly stunning Stortford would be your traditional kind of streetscape upgrade. I feel that there is a real opportunity to go a bit further with that and integrate infrastructure upgrades that are necessary as part of that, make it look better. And, you know, we really want the community to step up and advise us what they would like to see as part of that. You know, would they like a pocket park? Are they interested in just plant boxes or more kind of natural landscaped areas within our roading corridor? So yeah, very much integrated across both. Like, we would like to be able to take some options, but then to also understand what is really quite key to the community.
Sounds like it's an excellent opportunity for the community to get involved in how their neighbourhood looks now in the future. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think, you know, I'll use the word bold. This is not a tweak. The opportunity is not to just tweak, it's to actually create something new and different. Yes, it might have impacts on transport, and so we're looking at the consequences of making, you know, substantive change. And maybe it's just me, but I have this kind of vision of, you know, nice commercial area that people want to go to. You've got some kind of apartment living above that commercial, and then in behind that you've got your leafy streets and your mix of medium density and your current topologies. But those people have got this really vibrant community connection with the commercial strip, rather than it being lots of traffic going, you know, in two directions. And you can't create that unless you do something else with the traffic and turn it into something quite neat. We see it in lots of other places where they've done that sort of thing, turned a main thoroughfare into something that's very much more about walking and cycling and got your amenity and all your basic needs at your back doorstep, so to speak. It's an opportunity.
Thank you for that. Is there further to your presentation? No, that's great. All right, we've had quite a bit of information there. Do we have any questions? Councillor Baddo.
Have local area plans been used elsewhere in New Zealand or the world, and how effective have they been?
Certainly the neighbourhood scale planning is becoming a lot more of an issue as different councils move through their FDS processes. Understand that Nelson and Tasman are currently looking at this exact issue, whether or not that would result in a local area plan, so to speak. It will result in some kind of neighbourhood green planning. Like I say, we've got some examples in Porirua of the medium density developments, but whether or not that was done at a neighbourhood scale, again, not too sure. You know, same with Hobsonville, those are all kind of master plan suburbs, but they wouldn't necessarily form under the umbrella of a local area plan. That's kind of a Hastings specific term that's been used to describe, you know, that bridge between our high level strategies and our operative district plans. So to answer your question, not that I'm aware of, but there are other kind of parallel planning processes that are happening around the country.
Just a follow-up question. Are we planning on introducing these as medium density becomes more common, or as the front end of enabling more medium density to occur? Mostly because we're engaging in doing this partially because there's a perceived loss of amenity due to medium density occurring, and if the increase in amenity is done before the medium density comes through, I could see there being, again, that perception which we're trying to prevent.
Yeah, so the timing of this is coming out of a realisation that, you know, the uptake of comprehensive residential developments being very low in Hastings. There are a lot of examples of infill developments that's gobbling up our existing brownfield sites. So I think we do need to be bold in that we need to lead by example, but that certainly needs to be followed up by you know, some pretty rigid settings under the operative district plan to really set the expectation of what we're trying to achieve. So that would be, you know, looking to reduce the ability to do those one-off infill subdivisions within areas that have been identified as particularly appropriate for medium density housing. And that's why I've tried to keep these areas quite targeted. You know, we're not trying to blanket the city in it, because there will always be a place for, you know, infill developments and all people retaining their backyards. But where these areas are really definitively suited to medium density, that's kind of where we would want to be seeing the expectation and development of medium density.
Any other questions? No, thank you. On page 61, we have recommendations, which include the priority order for the local area plans. Can I please have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Fowler. Thank you, Councillor Watkins as a seconder. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you, that's carried. Thank you, team, and thank you for the comprehensive information. That concludes the agenda for today, and I'd like to ask Councillor Nepe if he will close us with a karakia.
Kia ora, Chair. I've sent an email out to all councillors so they can assist me in reciting our karakia. It's in your email attached file. So, e tū tātou, let's all stand together and I'll close the hui today with the karakia. Just a reminder, the reciter, the leader, is in black and everyone else is in white. Tū tawa mai I runga, tū tawa mai I raro, tū tawa mai I roto, tū tawa mai I waho. Kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora ki te katoa, hui te marama, hui te ora, korau noa, korau ora. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you.